So just so people know, if you are uncomfortable with that, I would just say to turn your camera off and then rename yourself as anonymous. But it will be recorded and I will share it afterwards with everybody along with the notes. So everybody has the links and everything like that. So just thank you everybody for coming to the first quarterly All Neighborhood Bike Ped meeting. We have officially been doing virtual meetings for exactly a year. We realized at Bike Pittsburgh, this is week 52 for us working from home and doing all that stuff. So, you know, congratulations for everybody working from home and bearing with us and being flexible. So, just to start off, for going over the agenda, we just did the welcome. Then we're going to go right into updates from us at Bike Pittsburgh. We have a lot of things to talk about. Then we will transition over to our guest speakers who are from the Breathe Project. They're on our call with us. I don't know if you want to wave, Matt and Christine. Thank you so much for coming. And we're excited to hear about how air quality and transit intersect with each other. Then we will have an update from Friends of the Riverfront. And then I wanted to spend a little bit of time just hearing about some of the capital budget requests that people are going to be submitting for their groups. And I thought we could have some sort of a breakout discussion about that and then hear updates from everybody, which will probably mold into the capital budget request discussion. So that's what we have to look forward to. I'm going to kick it over to Eric to go to start us off with these Bike Pittsburgh updates. The first one is about the Bike Summit.
Yeah, well, the Bike Summit happened. If you don't know, it's the big national bicycle and pedestrian. All the advocates get together. This is the second year. It's now been, hold on, someone needs to mute.
Maybe it's me.
Yeah, oh, second year it's been now online. So one of the things that we did this year was well, we do every year, but we do direct lobbying to our representatives. So we, along with Philly and some other advocates around the country, lobbied our senators, Toomey and Casey. And then locally, we had a meeting with Rep Doyle's office from Pittsburgh. And we basically had a couple asks, mostly regarding, like, we don't deal with a lot of national stuff, but when we do, it's kind of big. Like, for instance, we're trying to make sure that a lot of the transportation alternatives funding, for instance, which has paid for a lot of trail stuff specifically in the region, but also a lot of other bike stuff, stays in a new transportation bill that's coming up, among other things like that. And I think it's been effective. I don't know. It's so hard to say with such big, you know, in the federal government, but forming those relationships, I think, is really important, and it has helped keep some of the stuff that we are asking for in it. So, do you have anything else to add, Anna? Because you attended too.
Yeah, it's a really inspirational time. And this year had the most attendance. I think a lot of the reason for the high attendance was because it was virtual and there was a lower price point, which made it more accessible for a lot of nonprofits and people who just attend on their own because they run like a bike co-op, kind of like Free Ride, or they're just the only person in their town that does bike advocacy. So it was really exciting to see so many people. There was a big emphasis this year too on removing enforcement from the E's that are used to evaluate, and they gave a really good presentation from the league about how they are redistributing those criteria amongst the other E's and then bringing in equity as an elevated E instead of having that scattered throughout, having its standalone criteria. So it was just a really good time. We'll be coming out with kind of like a top 5, what we learned from the summit, and just stay tuned for that. But like Eric said, like lobby day went really well, and it's just a really good time. And hopefully next year I can do a little bit more pushing to see if we can get some of you to be able to attend. Yeah, if I'm not sure who is on a phone, I'm still hearing kind of like background noise. If everybody could mute themselves, for some reason I can't mute all. Um, it's not letting me mute all, so there's just some sort of weird noise. If people could just mute themselves, I'm not sure if maybe it's someone like on a telephone or not, but hopefully that'll help. So thank you. Next up is talking about the personal delivery devices, which I'm sure you've all heard about, but Eric can elaborate on that. You're muted, Eric.
I, I, I muted myself when I thought I was unmuting myself. Um, to catch everybody up, Pennsylvania passed a law that allowed for personal delivery devices, which are basically, well, they are robots to deliver packages, food, etc., to people. Weirdly enough, Pittsburgh is one of the only places, at least in Pennsylvania, if not the country, that has had a pilot program for these. Um, the bill allows them to be as large as essentially a refrigerator, and they're allowed to go 12 miles per hour on a sidewalk and pedestrian areas. It was written by FedEx, and it's, as you know, it sailed through on partisan lines. So I'm not going to get into that too much, but the where it's at now is, it kind of came as a surprise to PennDOT. And I do the one of the few times I feel kind of bad for PennDOT is that so the legislators legislated this in. They're considered pedestrians as well, like according to law, according to the vehicle code, they're considered pedestrians. And so PennDOT is tasked with dealing with it and dealing with the policy around it. And so they issued a policy report, or a policy sort of guidelines, and we were able to comment on it, et cetera, a draft. And then we submitted comments. I think Kelsey submitted some. Kelsey's been a part of these conversations as well, with the city. The city's been really active and trying to get a good outcome for this whole thing. And then they just issued their finalized policy. The big problems that we're seeing and the city recognizes is that the city has very little control over them. So the permit for them goes to the state and the state approves them, and they don't necessarily have to get that approval from the city. So it's unclear where they're going to be allowed, like on what streets. There are some things that were clear. So right now they are not going to be allowed in bike lanes, which is really good because they'd be allowed up to 25 miles per hour in the bike lanes, if they were. They will be allowed on streets up to 25 or 35 miles per hour or something. That part's a little unclear to me. And then at first they were not allowed on trails, but now they are going to be allowed on trails with some exceptions. And everybody's trying to figure this out. Us and Kelsey are on from Friends of the Riverfront are on a, like a group of advocates across the state that are trying to figure out the best, or how to move forward with this. I don't know. Did I cover that all, Kelsey? I think I caught it all in a summary.
Yeah, I think so. I would just say, so at first they said no trails, and then they said no trails, but if it's like a pedestrian, if the trail looks like a pedestrian zone or area, then they're permitted on those. And so there's some parts of our trails that are kind of pedestrian areas, like especially on bridges, like Hot Metal Bridge, and then places like Station Square, where you're kind of like, it looks a little pedestrian like. So we're not sure how it's going to play out on those spaces, and still have some other questions about where the trail goes on private property or like quasi public property, like URA property and Alcoasam property and things like that. So
Yeah.
definitely a lot of things to figure out.
Eric or Kelsey, this is, obviously I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a transportation expert, but when they say they are treated as pedestrians, what does that mean? I don't understand. I had seen that in the news report and really didn't get it. So if they get hit by a car or something, that the laws would be the same as if the driver had struck a human being because they struck this refrigerator driving down the street at 12 miles an hour?
I think that's part of it. I don't think anybody really knows, to be quite honest. Another part of it is you know, I think because it's part of the Title 75, which is the vehicle code, Pennsylvania Vehicle Code, because they're classified as pedestrians, they have to follow all the same rules that are in the vehicle code as pedestrians. You know, so that's how they are like sort of,
So,
that's
so
the
if it's a
guidance, that's
don't
the
walk
guidance.
sign, they should not be out in the intersection and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. So, but then that opens up a lot of weird things because they're also allowed on the street, but pedestrians aren't allowed on the street unless there's no sidewalk, like no sidewalk. So there's like a hierarchy of where these things are going to be allowed to go. Like, if possible, they're supposed to be on the street. If that's not possible, then they can use a trail or a sidewalk. And so there's, or a well, first the berm and then a street, and then you know, everybody's trying to figure this out right now, and nobody knows the exact answers, I think is the question. And one thing
Does
that
the
like we
state-
don't, yeah, the
Does the
state,
state have any timeline for when they expect to have some sort of draft regulations out?
well, a lot of those came out, but there's still a lot of question marks in it. So like I said, they put out a draft policy recommendations. We submitted comments. They issued a finalized one, but they also recognize that it's going to be a work in progress, or you know, a living document, so to speak. So we think, we don't know. This is all like a brave new world for literally everybody
And
on
it
every
sounds like
level of this.
the good aspect of it is that the default answer is they can do it unless we fight to have it forbidden because FedEx wrote the law.
Yeah. So
Cool.
I don't know. I just worry about places like locally, like the North Shore, for instance. You know, I just imagine, you know, pizzas being shipped back and forth like all day, every day between the stadium and the casino, or like, you know, things like that. So, oh, there's a question. They are not. So there's like, not to get too deep into it, but they can be fully autonomous, but they are often they at first they have to have a person that's sort of managing it. Now these people can manage. This is one of those points of contention. At first it was up to 25 at once, and I think it went up to like 100 at once or some crazy thing. So that if something happens, that they can intervene and like do something with it. And then at first, for the first phase of it, they have to be local. It's like they have to be within sight of the robots. But then after like something like 8 weeks, they can be anywhere on Earth and control them. So they can be in San Francisco and control robots in Pittsburgh. So it's a really strange, you know, future we have, to say the least. Or Dubai, yeah. Or the restriction on who can use these. Yeah, there is some restrictions. They have like, you have to get like, there's some sort of licensing requirement. I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. I
Do
think
you know what
that's,
other cities have similar legislation? I know states like, I think Florida is another state, but I can't remember exact cities.
they're mostly states that have I don't know if any cities have them.
That's what I
We're
thought.
we're literally not allowed to have a local ordinance about them, according to the state law.
So it's essentially like the railroad. They get to fly through and do whatever they want and really have no local accountability whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, PennDOT claims they're going to be making, like the law states they have to consult municipalities, but doesn't say that they have to listen to the municipalities. And then another issue that comes up is like trails, for instance, is that the trails some trails aren't owned by the municipality, they're owned by a private, or, you know, the railroad, for instance. And so, you know, does the municipality, like, do they even have to consult the trail groups? So anyway, that's all I got on that.
The next topic is parking protected bike lane bill. Just a
Oh,
quick update on
okay.
that.
Brief update. So we failed last year on it. It did not pass. Basically, there was one senator in Philadelphia who sabotaged the whole thing. His name happens to be Sabatino. But this year it was one of the first bills in all of Pennsylvania to be submitted in the House. It has already passed House Transportation Committee. It got its first House vote, and on March 15th, it's getting its second House vote. And then the next day, it should get its third House vote, which means it passes the House and then goes over to the Senate. We're hoping that the senator doesn't sabotage it again. As of right now, we have actually, are working with Philadelphia. We've actually hired a consultant to help us, like a lobbyist, basically, to help us figure this out. And he's suggesting right now to like lay low, let it get through the House side, and then we might need to do some sort of activation in the Senate side, depending on how things go. So his recommendation right now is just to lay low, just know that it's happening, know that it's moving forward, and hopefully, hopefully it sails through this time.
Does anyone have questions about that? I know that was a hot topic last year. If not, we can move on to Move Forward, which is our biggest campaign at the moment.
Me again? Oh,
Yeah, it's all you until the next two.
sorry. I left my water in the other room. What's going on with Move Forward? We have a lot of meetings coming up. Anna, can you drop a link to the meetings as I'm talking? That would be cool. From the Move Forward site. So we had a meeting. So one thing that the city's doing, which it's still, the jury's still out on whether it's going to be successful. This approach is going to be successful or not. I think it's a good approach, but is to introduce a suite of projects all at once. If you don't know, the Move Forward program is a program of the city of Pittsburgh to rapidly implement the brand new bike plan. We are, us, as well as Healthy Rider partners, as well as People for Bikes, who's contributing a whole lot of money and in-kind support for it. And so there's been some fits and starts with it, but we had a recent meeting, over 200 people attended, and it was the sort of Shadyside Squirrel Hill cluster of projects that were all introduced all at once. We found that to be actually a pretty good approach on one level, because it often with public meetings, people feel like their street is being targeted or they're being targeted for bike lanes or whatever. And this sort of help people understand that it's the bigger picture, that it's a network. It's not just, they didn't do something wrong, or they're not being targeted, for instance, for this, for a change in streets. It's a whole citywide initiative. And I think that the cluster approach kind of helped with that, although it's harder to dive deeper into each individual project. So there are a couple individual projects that do need a little bit more community input and guidance. That includes the Shadyside connector, which is trying to figure out the sort of Ellsworth Avenue corridor. And then another one in that cluster is Beacon Street. The city wants to do something on Beacon Street to extend the bike lanes and try to connect over to Beechwood Boulevard from Shenley Park. And that one is also going to require like a sort of a higher level of community input. So keep your eyes peeled on those. So there's going to be specific meetings about those two projects coming up. And then there's also a North Side cluster meeting coming up, where there's the same deal, like a whole bunch of projects all at once are going to be presented and giving people the opportunity to explain.
That's on the 17th for any Northsiders that might be here.
Thanks. Yeah, I haven't memorized all the all the meetings yet. But yeah, Anna dropped a link over there with all the next Move Forward meetings.
Yeah, there's a whole slew of them, and they could definitely use your support. The next thing I wanted to talk about were advocacy workshops, which tie into Move Forward, especially the next one, which is going to be on March 24th at noon, which is going to be about how to write powerful letters to the editor and op-eds, which also ties into, any other advocacy that you do, which is just how to write a powerful narrative and how to tell your story when in a concise way that will lead to getting published, because anybody can submit letters, but you're not necessarily guaranteed to be published. And so we have a guest speaker who's going to lead a workshop about how to do this and how to write effective letters to the editor and op-eds, which I think will be particularly helpful for everybody on this call and other advocates, because as you well know, a lot of narratives in the Post Gazette, in the Trib, like in any news outlet, usually just bashes biking or bashes, anything that has to do with the work that we're trying to do. And it's usually because naysayers are the people that come out and, raise the most, are the loudest voices, and people who are either in support of things or who are neutral don't really vocalize it because it's already happening. And so the goal of this workshop is to really help everybody find their voice and feel empowered to write positive, opinion pieces or letters to the editor supporting biking and walking, supporting multimodal transit, and all of that kind of stuff. So hopefully you can attend. It will be recorded, and I'll share it if you can't, but if you want to register, the link to register is in the agenda. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is the new advocacy toolkit that we just published and just posted on our website. I'm going to drop the link in to the chat. It's really exciting. I'm going to try to also screen share for just 1 second. Can everybody see this toolkit? Okay, so I'm really excited to share it with everybody because, as you can see, the graphics are really exciting. It's a lot more energetic than the last one, which was basically just an attempt to get it out there and get it published, and it was basically just on a Word document. And this one, we got a graphic designer to really make it approachable and user-friendly. So it's on our website. It's free to download. You can download it for yourself. I can send you a copy of it if you would like a copy. We're trying to figure out how to make it fillable so you can just fill it out online. But I would recommend everybody just kind of take a look at it and see, kind of refresh yourself on what a bike ped group can do, what Bike Pittsburgh offers by way of help. There's a whole section in here of like what I personally or Eric or Bike Pittsburgh in general can do to help groups out. And I kind of forget to always announce them at meetings because there's so many other things going on, but I'm more than happy to do kind of like consulting you to help with your campaigns and going through this steps. I'm doing it with the South Side right now. We're doing a one-on-one campaign planning for PJ McCardle intersection. And so it's just a really, as you can see, super pretty, really user-friendly, a lot more enjoyable to look at, and updated pictures and things like that. So please take a look at it. If you notice anything, it's a working document, so it can always be updated and fixed if you notice some typos. I did notice one typo already, but it's okay. It's just a page number. And that's it. And does anybody have any questions on any of these updates before we jump over to our guest speakers?
I would advocate for anyone who is working on any projects that involve government or really lobbying anyone to try to look through it. It's really helpful. I would be safe to say there's no rocket science in there, but it's a good organized way to think about some things, and kind of it sets you up for a series of meetings at which you can have an organized agenda that gets you somewhere instead of kind of meandering all over the place as unstructured meetings often do. So I think it lays the steps out in ways, and not every step is going to apply to every project. So you sort of have to pick and choose, but it kind of gives you a good framework to get started. And really, I mean, any project that we're involved with in any capacity involves lobbying somebody for something. So I think it's broadly applicable and general enough that you can use it for lots of different specific projects.
Thanks. I'm going to hand it over now to our guest speakers, who we are very excited to have. They're from the Breathe Project. And as you all know, when you're biking out there, you're breathing in all that air. So without further ado, I'm just going to turn it over to them and let them introduce themselves and talk to you about what they're here to talk about.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much for inviting Breathe Project tonight. I'm here with Christine. Christine, if you want to say hi.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we really appreciate being able to talk with you all tonight. About how much time do we have, just to make sure that we're tailored to your agenda here?
Yeah, I would say go for like 20 minutes or so.
Okay, great.
If you run over, if it's shorter, no problem. We're pretty loose.
We'll keep it tight. Yeah, everybody's on Zoom all day, so we'll keep it tight. Thank you very much. So I'm gonna just share my screen here. I have a couple of slides to share about the Breathe Project. Many of you may have heard about us over the past couple of years, but we appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you all, because really at the core of our work is the fact that air quality is one of these regional issues that really holds everyone back. It holds back our health. It holds back our ability to grow. It holds back our ability to thrive. And it impacts every sector, but especially people who like to be active outdoors. You know, I'm a runner, I'm a cyclist. It impacts me. And so I appreciate coming tonight to just share some basic facts with you all about our airshed. And Christine's going to talk about a particular campaign that we've got revving up, and then we'll talk about some things more in general. So Breathe Project, right now we are 47 different organizations all working together to try to improve air quality in southwestern Pennsylvania. At the core of the Breathe Project are people who work in public health and air quality science, so that we know what the facts are about our air quality. We've spent a lot of time calling out myths about our air that have been spun over the years, and even framing air quality so that people recognize the challenge that we face. And on top of that, building off of that core, our neighborhood community groups. We work with communities directly who may experience air quality issues. And then there's an array of environmental groups that participate that may have legal capacity or do community organizing work as well too. And it's taking all of us, because it's really what it's going to take to move the needle on air quality, because of how entrenched and systemically coupled air quality has been to this region's problems for a long time. So, if there are two messages I want to get across tonight, it's that we still have a serious air quality problem, and adding to it is just going to make it worse. You may have seen headlines lately that Allegheny County, for the first time in its history, has attained the federal air quality standard for particles, PM 2.5. And that is not technically incorrect, but that is ignoring a larger public health issue that still exists regardless of whether we skate closely above or below this legal line that separates what's legal and not legal for how we operate. Those headlines don't capture some of the episodic events that we continue to experience in the Pittsburgh region. And a lot of it is explained by events that occur by major facilities in and around Pittsburgh. So I'm just going to show a couple of things. I'm going to switch my screen here quickly to some videos. This is, an event from June of this past year at the Edgar Thomson Steelworks. I don't know if you can you see that? Where you'll see a red eruption that comes from the blast furnace at Edgar Thomson. There it goes, right there. And you can see that when the atmospheric conditions are a certain way, that these emissions settle in over the town, and it blows right into the city. And in fact, we've recently had, we may be experiencing actually overnight tonight a bad smell event where the city as a whole will be impacted by poor air quality because of there being a high pressure system, the winds blowing from the south, and there being a low ceiling height with an inversion that traps pollution on the surface. So we have these episodes that seem to happen more frequently than what they should every couple of weeks. And so one of the things that I want to show next is this new tool from the CREATE Lab. And this is from February 21st. And this is showing emissions from the Clairton Coke Works, the Edgar Thomson Works, and this is the Cheswick Power Plant. And then this is a facility in the West Mifflin area. I'm sorry, this one's Edgar Thomson. This one is the Irvin Works and the Clairton Coke Works. And you see that overnight, the winds shift, and you can see the Smell Pittsburgh reports and the lighting up of volatile organic compound monitors that are low-cost monitors that are distributed throughout the region. So the timeline here is it starts at so it's ending. So it's overnight. You can see the winds shift, and then the pollution goes right over the city. People wake up and the air stinks, and people register their complaints on the Smell Pittsburgh app, which are the triangle. So despite some recent headlines, we still have ongoing air quality problems in the region. And we want people to understand that there are tools for measuring this and capturing this and communicating about this, which is an essential thing because we have regulators that aren't moving with the degree of swiftness that is needed to protect our health, and they get caught up in all sorts of legal tangles that exist. Some other evidence, we get straight Fs still from the American Lung Association. So this slide says 2019, but it applies to 2020. It's 2019 data that was released in 2020. The American Lung Association releases this report every April, or the same week as Earth Week. So that will be coming up to see if there are any updates there. The last data that we have for EPA qualified data is through 2019. And you can see about 2/3 of the time our air is rated not good by the Air Quality Index. Now in 2020, it's because of the reduction in people driving around. This number has shifted to be about slightly less than half the time our air is not good. So there was a slight improvement in 2020, but not as much as you might think, given how many restaurants have shut down and commuting and so on that is shut down. You may, the county recently celebrated our attainment of air standards that were set in 2012. And so what I'm going to walk you through is a series of charts of every EPA air monitor that measures particles in the United States going back to the year 2000. And you can see in the year 2000, the bulk of the country was not meeting the requirements that eventually would be set in the year 2012. And I'm going to march forward here through time. So in 2008, you can see the proportion of monitors shifting from red to the blue color. This is 2009, and then this is 2012, when the current standard was set. And one thing I want to note is when that standard was set, you can see already about 80% of the country was already able to meet that standard, but our region has not. And we'll march forward in time. We're now at the year 2015, more of the country in attainment. And then this is 2018. And that's the last slide that I have. And so we are at the 99th percentile lagging in meeting that standard. In 2020, we just barely met the standard. So we are essentially coming in last place on air quality. And anyone that's doing a victory lap is not doing us any service, because the only reason why the standards weren't made more health protective last year was because of who was in charge of the Environmental Protection Agency and overrode public health recommendations with a political solution. And that's going to be revisited. So we're going to end up in last place again when that standard gets changed. And in fact, if you look at all monitors throughout the United States and rank them, the monitor located in Liberty, which is here it's labeled as McKeesport, but it's actually in Liberty Borough, that monitor is worse than 97% of all monitors in the country. The one in Braddock is worse than 94% of the country, and the Wilkinsburg monitor next to the Parkway East is worse than 94% of the air throughout the country. But you can see, you know, most of our region is still, even if you get outside of the Mon Valley, still are ranked in the worst, you know, 30% of monitors throughout the country, no matter how far you get away from the urban core. And of course, the main culprit and concern are PM 2.5, 2.5 micron particles. About 30 of these will fit across the width of a human hair. They're dangerous because when you breathe them in, your lungs' defense systems can't protect you from them. And these will go right into your bloodstream and accumulate in tissue. If you averaged all of our monitors throughout the region and ranked them against other metropolitan regions, our air ranks at about the 11th percentile, where New York is about the 50th percentile. And so that gives you an idea, like no one wakes up in New York and says, smell that crisp, clean air. You know, it just shows you how far we have to go. And this is a complicated chart. The only point of my showing it is that it shows that there's no lower bound for improvement of health protection if you keep improving that standard. If you make the standard lower, it saves lives. If you keep the standard higher, it ends up harming people. The other thing I wanted to point out is that industry still is the major contributor of our air problems in our region. About 60% of our pollution comes from industrial sources like Clairton Coke Works and the Edgar Thomson Works. And about 25% or so is from mobile sources. That's different than places like Los Angeles, where mobile sources make up the majority. So we have a unique airshed because of our industry. And, you know, there are health implications for this. This is showing the National Air Toxics Assessment cancer risk on a percentile basis. And you can see that most of Allegheny County, well, the red areas are, you're in the top 5% of cancer risk throughout the country from compared with the entire country from air pollution. Some of the best areas in the county, you're still in the worst half of counties nationally. So our county doesn't rank well, and that's because of the particles that accumulate in lung tissue, in other body tissue. We have high rates of bladder cancer in the Pittsburgh area. That's actually because of air pollution and where those particles accumulate over time. And so we have, you know, this is the risk to the population. We have a significant number of people who have COPD or asthma, higher rates of cardiovascular disease. And when there are pollution events like we experience regularly, these folks are people who are put at higher risk of having worse outcomes because of the immunocompromised situation that they have. And I will also say that the Harvard Public Health Research points to the fact that exposure to particles results in worse outcomes for COVID-19. It's about an 8% increase in COVID-19 outcomes that are poorer with every 1 microgram per cubic meter increase in exposure to air pollution. So anyhow, I just want to emphasize we still have an air quality problem, and adding to it will only make things worse. I'm not going to get into all of the petrochemical system build out that we're working on with the Shell cracker plant and all the fracking wells and compressor stations and so on that are being built, and pipelines and so on being built throughout the region, but that's another talk. I just want to end with, we've been down this path before. We know what happens when you bet on a high volume, low margin, very polluting industrial infrastructure. This is the US Steel Homestead Works at one time, where the waterfront is now. And it took us about 40 years just to clean this up. And we're still cleaning it up since that industry closed. So we need to not go backwards in time and look forward to supporting clean energy, supporting infrastructure that enhances people's health. And that's where, bicycling is a key point of this. It lowers emissions, but people who bicycle or who recreate along the rivers shouldn't put their health at risk because of accumulation of air pollution. And so we need to make that change happen, and advocating for clean energy and an infrastructure that we want to see. So with that, I'm going to pause here and turn it over to Christine, so that because she can talk about some a campaign we're working on that's really impactful for the river trails. So Christine, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Matt. And I'm going to set a timer here for about 8 minutes and try to keep to that. So please do hold me to it. And
Okay. Also take your time too. Like, I don't want you to feel too rushed.
okay, but I'll try to be succinct. Good practice for me.
Okay.
I wanted to speak briefly about one piece of that 58% of industrial source pollution that Matt mentioned. I'm going to share my screen briefly. Oh dear. I have some sort of problem with my Zoom setting here.
Down at the bottom, do you see the screen share?
I do see that, but then when it comes up, it's giving me all kinds of error messages. Could I share the link? It's online and
Yeah.
somebody else run it. Would that be okay? Okay.
Matt, do you want to do that, or?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
If you put it in the chat, I can.
Sure. Sorry
put it
about
on the
that.
screen.
I don't know. I've had this problem a couple of times today and I thought I solved it, but apparently I did not. So let me just tell you, as I'm sharing that, how I got involved with this. The majority of my time is spent working on a community health and reforestation initiative through Plant 5 for Life. And we're a collaborative member of the Breathe Project's larger collaborative that Matt mentioned, which is 47 organizations strong now. And our initial interest, my interest in joining the collaborative was really around the mobile source pollution, knowing that we have a regional problem and a countywide problem that really can't be solved by planting trees. It can help, but it can't actually solve the problem. And I was more interested in how can we plant trees near traffic corridors to mitigate pollution and mimic something or learn and build upon something that is going on in another city, Louisville, Kentucky, called the Greenheart Project. We've since been awarded an Allegheny County Health Department grant to launch that in part here, to actually measure pre and post impacts of planting trees on near traffic corridors. But in working with the collaborative, I began to pay more and more attention to what was in my general surroundings as a Shadyside resident. And people in the Shadyside Complete Streets group know that I've kind of advocated for air quality issues for a while now. And I'm sorry, I'm going to change. I have to get this to Matt here. Hang on. Matt, I hope this goes through.
Sorry, it says I need permission.
Let me see if that works. Does that work? Let's see, I just gave it to you. No.
There it goes. Okay, sharing screen. Thank you.
Okay, great, super appreciate it. So I became, I'll just anecdotally, and obviously here I'm about to go probably over 8 minutes already, but anecdotally, I began to notice a different smell than our what was in the usual mix of our Clairton Coke Works and other major pollution source smell events, which have a telltale kind of sulfuric smell to them. It was almost like a burnt tire kind of asphalty smell. And I knew that we weren't paving around here in Shadyside at that time. And one day I decided to drive around to try to find the smell. And what I came across was the Forbes exit over at 376 and passed by the Birmingham Bridge, and it was a match. So Matt, if you want to hit present, it looks like when I was messing around
Can you see it if I do that?
Yep.
Okay.
And if you click on site of concern at the top, we can just go to the site through Google Earth. You know, in raising the question to the collaborative, if anyone knew what this was under the Birmingham Bridge that could generate that smell, because I could see that there was an industrial plant there, but I didn't know much about it. And doing some Google research, I learned that this was an asphalt plant and a ready mix concrete plant on the essentially the right side of the bridge. There is the concrete production facility, and the Lindy is on the left, the asphalt production. You know, I learned that other people in the collaborative had smelled it too. They weren't able to use the smell app because they were in transit. And the more I looked into what asphalt produces, I realized we might have a contributing factor to our, you know, East End neighborhoods, and particularly to Uptown and Oakland, in terms of a pollution source of real concern. And one of the, you know, major concerns from an asphalt plant are the hazardous air pollutants that come from there. And these are things like compounds like formaldehyde, hexane, phenol, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, toluene, and, you know, things like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons are known to cause in animals birth defects, reproduction issues, cancers, and immune system disorders. And it doesn't take a whole lot of production to generate what are called fugitive emissions from an asphalt plant. So some data says that you produce about 100,000 tons of asphalt and you get about 50 tons of fugitive emissions, meaning they escape the boundaries of the production facility, essentially, and move out into the community. This particular facility produces about 750,000 tons a year, and they are currently operating under an expired permit, meaning their last 5-year permit has come to an end, and they're up for renewal and review by the health department. Matt, if you could go back to the slideshow, that would be great. So what if you go to the next slide, maybe you can hit present again. So I'll get back to that, what that means that they're up for renewal. In short, it means we have a window of time to gather information to determine if this is a pollution source of concern. So these are just some pictures taken back in October before they ceased operations for the winter. You can see just from the Heritage Trail, which I'm sure many of you have biked before or walked on, that crosses just behind the plant. These pictures were taken from there. There's a cloud of particulate matter or dust of some sort being generated from the site. And Matt, if you could go to the next slide. You can see some arrows here that indicate some other areas of concern. There is a smokestack here that's basically the off the off product of the combustion, the melting of recycled asphalt. And it should not be black, but what we were able to capture in the photo, which is difficult to see here, is that it was a discolored emission. As well, when these two silos here pour product into the trucks, which you can see at least one of them in this photo, labeled 1 in the photo to the left as well. Those trucks leave the facility uncovered from what we understand. And that may be a source. And you can see conveyor belts here too, which when you zoom in, they're also uncovered. So, you know, these pictures began to set us on this path of additional investigation. If you could just go to the next slide. And, you know, historically, we can see emissions. Some of this could just be steam, but it also could be noxious pollutants. You could just go to the next slide. This is a table from their permit that shows what they're regulated for and how much they're allowed to emit. The interesting thing that we've learned, next slide, is that the site is not really monitored for the sum total of the emissions they produce. About 60% of the emissions may not meet safe levels, and that is ultimately because they're not tightly monitored or regulated. This is just a diagram of the plant. You've already seen the live photo of it, but again, yeah, some of these pollutants of concern, we went back and looked at the data to see what the trends are in terms of emissions. And you can see a lot of them are on the rise. Next slide. You know, methane, hexane. Hexane causes all sorts of issues with the central nervous system. Next slide. Won't go too into the weeds here. And formaldehyde, we can note here particularly because in the application that is pending before the health department, they're asking for the ability to stop monitoring for formaldehyde. So that's notable, as well as an increase in production to 1 million tons per year. Okay, next slide. I just am quickly noting this. If you want to look it up online, it's a great resource to learn more about asphalt plants, how they work, which pollutants may be coming from them. Next slide. And so, you know, we're asking ourselves right now, what do we want to know? How do we acquire that information? Under the current permit, when we look closely, it does seem like there's already evidence of violation of fugitive emissions. There's a clause in their permit that says those emissions cannot leave the boundary and that their materials need to be covered on site. So we see multiple instances where that may not be the case. So as that permit is being prepared for the next 5 years by the health department, and currently there's no schedule for public comment and the draft is not complete from what we understand. So we don't know when that process will begin to be triggered. We can do a lot of things to help understand the impact on public health from that site and to, you know, kind of citizen monitor it and get prepared for that hearing. That's everything from, you know, increasing smell app sign up and use to photographic observation and documentation. We have some folks from Bike Pittsburgh who've offered actually, and from Friends of the Riverfront who've offered to steward the trail and take photographs and document when possible. That's something, if anybody's interested in doing that, along with the 2 individuals who volunteered, we are going to set up a monthly check-in, and they'll be, you know, that could be a good way to converse about this. If you have experiences of odors that are that telltale asphalt smell, reporting it to the county health department and also to your county district representative, as well as to your council, city council person, that would be important. It's important to note that the city does get a lot of, asphalt product from this plant. So the monitor host sign up is another thing. We've noticed there are lots of gaps in the monitor network that's out there. I was going to show you an image of the PGH Purple Air page, but I won't do that here, but you can go there yourself. It's purpleair.com, and you can zoom in on that site, and you can see that there are not many monitors in that area. So we've started to plug those holes. If you know of anyone who wants to host a monitor in any of those gap areas, please contact us. And then, yeah, that previous slide, Matt, if you just want to go back to it really quickly. I think looking for opportunities to integrate air quality data collection and improvements is definitely something that I see as possible, between these two efforts, between what you're doing with Bike Pittsburgh and the neighborhood groups. For example, the Ellsworth corridor, I've been encouraging our representatives there to consider putting up monitors along the Ellsworth corridor and along the rail corridor that runs behind it, so that we can get at a very minimum, a baseline of what's going on there from an air pollution standpoint, and then see if any of these street improvements that they're making to slow down traffic, to switch out to electric buses, this sort of thing is actually making a difference. And that's where, good data and these sensors come in as a tool, and can also be a fantastic community engagement tool. So I'll say that that's really the sum total of it. And I'd love to hear your thoughts if you've smelled the smell from this particular site. If you've been on that trail or anywhere, we'd love to hear about it, and just open the discussion for a few minutes at least, if there's time. I'm definitely over my 8 minutes. Sorry about that.
Thank you so much. That was so informative. I'm sure we've all smelled that. I have totally smelled it, but I'll open it up for questions. Just feel free to unmute yourselves and ask away.
I used to live right by Lindy Paving, like in Uptown, and I would smell it all the time. Like it was nonstop. I would call the county, but nothing like ever happened. I'm curious. You said if you're looking for people for who might be able to put an air quality monitor near there. Like what does that look like? Like how is it big? Like just I have a friend who still lives there, so might be able to ask her.
That would be great. Yeah, they're pretty small. The Purple Air and the VOC monitors are about the size of your palm. Yeah, and if I could share my screen, I'd show you a picture. I'd be happy to send you a photo, a link. It's 2 screws in the structure. You can sometimes hang it on something that exists, and you need an outdoor source of electricity. Typically there is it depends on which monitor. You might need Wi-Fi to be able to connect, or you can do an internal cell modem monitor. That's a little more complicated, but basically, if there's someone who you think might be interested, just connect them with us and we can take it from there. It's just a couple of questions, a quick site visit. We put one up today in a half hour at a site along the river, for example.
Oh, okay.
That's what it
Cool.
looks like. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks. Cool. I can keep asking questions if no one else is.
Go for it. Really interesting.
Well,
You smelled the Lindy when you lived over there. I've heard that from a lot of people in Uptown.
Yeah, it would get really bad. I mean, like really bad at sometimes where, I would get headaches and whatnot from it. But I actually had a question about the, like, I saw that I've never seen that animation before with the plume. That was pretty wild.
Yeah, so that's just being launched, actually. CMU just did a soft launch of that last week. And you're going to see much more press coverage of that going forward. It's a very powerful tool that more and more people will use. But you can go to, it's plumepgh.org.
I think I put it in the chat.
Yeah, I
and
didn't
you
realize it was
can-
part of a longer video. Yeah.
You can
Well, you
go and
can-
look at it by day. Now,
You
what I
can-
want to say is the most important thing that I can request of this group is for you to message to your city and county representatives that air quality is an important thing because of the impact on mobility and bicycling and outdoor rec and quality of life. And what will change this is a relentless message being delivered to people who are in, that hold the seat of power. And at first, the city council people might say, well, we don't regulate air quality. The county does that, call them. The response to that is, we need you to call the county and ask them to do that. We need city council and the mayor to pass resolutions to demand that air quality be improved. We also need people to call their county council members and say, you need to hold the Board of Health accountable to improving air quality standards so that our region's health isn't continually put at risk. Now, I'm not asking you to do that alone. We are having a launch event on April 8th for it's a series of neighborhoods that span all the way across the county. They've just come together and it's a total grassroots thing that's being organized. And we'll make sure that once they get their flyer done, I think it's going to be produced on Wednesday, we'll send it to you. And we want people to turn out for that event. And then we want people from there to be relentless in letting our region's leadership know that air quality is a big deal and it needs to be fixed. So, yeah. And so, okay, so I see Thomas saying, but what about the jobs? The reality is US Steel spent $1.5 billion investing in a non-unionized mill in Arkansas last year. And they took out huge amounts of debt to do that. And they now, 2 weeks ago, they issued stock to try to get people to give them money to pay their debt down. They didn't invest a penny of it in any of the plants in the Mon Valley. So their plans for the Mon Valley most likely are to either scale it back or shut it down because of the cost for them to upgrade them. So the lack of investment is where what will be the loss of jobs, not demanding that air quality be held accountable. And also, there are a lot more people that work in a lot of other industries that depend on quality of life than those jobs. So we think it's actually a winning message for most people that polluters should be held accountable and they shouldn't be allowed to damage people's health.
I put the link to the the county complaint online form in the chat if anybody wants to.
It's
keep
a
that
user
handy.
hostile interface.
It is
Intentionally
user
so,
hostile. That's
but
true.
we are also putting pressure on them to fix that as well too. It does matter if those complaints are registered there. So following through and putting them there, they do see them. We can follow up with them. It does matter for those complaints to be registered.
It is possible too to also, if you're in the city, to use 311, if that's an easier way to lodge your complaint. They may still at this time try to direct you to the health department, but Erica Strasburger is working on making sure they receive and accept those complaints. So you can start now. I've started using 311 and they may redirect you, but just keep calling and they'll eventually be opening it up, hopefully. And record it.
Sorry, I have another question about Lindy Paving.
Sure.
Well, I know the city used to own that facility and then they sold it, I think, to Lindy Paving. But did they make any improvements when they bought it? And then two, would covering up, say the chute, like the chutes where stuff
Conveyor
can
belts,
escape?
yeah.
Yeah, conveyor belts, thanks. would that like make significant impacts in the air quality in that area? Like, and that seems like a practical thing that they could potentially do. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So at this time, we think that Lindy is actually renting that land from, they are the leasee to the other side of that parcel, which is Lehigh Hansen. And Lehigh Hansen is a subsidiary of a parent company based in Germany called Heidelberg Cement Group. And our understanding is that they own the property now and lease to Lindy, which has some positive benefits because I won't go too into the weeds, but Heidelberg is a publicly traded company. So it is possible to have a vote or say in some of what their decision-making is if we were to purchase a share, for example, or we might consider that Heidelberg Cement Group is trying to have a very public face that is green in both in Germany and around the world. They have subsidiaries everywhere. So like, for example, Hansen is advertising that their concrete went into the Frick Environmental Center and that they're the greenest, one of the greenest, concrete makers around. And so, knowing that, we feel like that might come in handy possibly down the line. As far as impact on making those changes, I mean, conceivably, yes. I think, I don't know that we definitely haven't quantified that at this stage. And it might be something to give a pass at or ask someone to give a pass at, but it should improve things measurably, as well as covering those piles, for example, and making sure what's called the bag house, where all of the particulate matter funnels to, is sealed and not leaky, and that those trucks are covered. All of that should incrementally make some kind of difference. But I think the main thing is that we wouldn't know that unless they were monitored properly. So right now they self-monitor, except for once every 5 years, the health department checks on them with their own monitoring. And so one of the things we could easily ask is, can you please put a monitor on your stack so we can tell if truly there are fugitive emissions leaving the facility? Because right now we risk getting the response from the health department that this is all anecdotal. You just smell it. The sensors that are picking up particulate matter may be in a gradient. That's kind of what we're hypothesizing, is we may see a gradient of change from close to far. Well, how do we know that you pinpoint that right back to Lindy? So the best thing we can do is, I think, at this point is have on our radar asking for that on-site monitoring that would be meaningful. But right now it seems like they're supposed to have coverage, and there must be a reason the health department wanted that in terms of the conveyor belts and the piles and so forth. So I assume there's some scientific reason behind that they would stand behind. So first, get them to be in compliance with their existing permit, and then how can we toughen up monitoring and regulations on their future permit? I don't know if that answers your question.
Who else has questions? Bruce, I've seen you unmute. If you
I
can-
have a question. This is great, by the way, thank you. I just wanted to kind of like parallel this with like advocacy efforts that us, multimodal bike advocates talk about, right? When we are fighting for better infrastructure, a lot of the blowback that we get from people are like, oh, if you take away parking, how are they going to visit my store, right? And I think we kind of talked about this a little before about like, what about the jobs, right? I'm thinking that was like US Steel though. I'm thinking like for Lindy, like, are we basically just asking them is the advocacy and the action basically at the moment to strengthen and toughen up the monitoring and the emissions, or is the eventual goal to like get them out of the city? Like, it sounds like what you're talking about is just like, let's just like make sure it's really tough that they cover up some things. But like in the long run, are we talking about actually like getting these industries out of, you know, urban dense areas of our cities where a lot of people live and need to live to be really like a close community? What is there a long-term plan that your group or any of our groups should be thinking about as far as taking a real stance on getting these things out of our city? Are we being like, you can be here, just like, you know, just play by the rules, which might be really low for them, you know? Like, I'm just wondering what your take on that is.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, I might turn this over to you, but I want to just say that I think, you know, in the long term, this all comes down to fossil fuel consumption and combustion, right? I mean, that's sort of the source of so many of these problems, and clean energy is kind of the big long-term strategy and goal, right? On some level, but I think, you know, Lindy has 5 jobs at its peak. That's what they list in their permit. Jobs may or may not be an issue there. Certainly for those 5 people, you know, that's a concern. But yeah, I think it's quite odd that we have this facility in the city on sort of prime river real estate, and also in a place where you know, stormwater and runoff is a big concern for the river. They do have a history of a problem there as well. Matt, do you want to speak to long-term strategy and whether the goal is
Well,
to get them out of
there are
town or
There are
not?
really 3 layers to the answer. So
Right.
the first one is the one that's the most basic, and that is there needs to be stronger enforcement and penalties that actually mean something for an industry that violates them. And that's working within the existing regulatory framework. There's nothing radical there. And in fact, we anticipate later on this month or in April, the county is going to, it'll come before county council to approve increases in permit fees for any industry that is a major emitter. And we know that US Steel is going to lobby to get them to try to not increase those fees. So, you know, and why are the fees needed? The fees pay for attorneys to do enforcement. So paying attention to what's happening at county council and showing up for those meetings and say, yeah, you damn well better increase those fees is something that everyone can do, and it's very short and quick and upfront. Now, you know, second level, if you look at the economic value of an industry like this paving plant or, you know, some of these steel works compared with the other types of jobs and things that are available in the community, and the negative impacts on health and the negative impacts on toxicity and cleanup, you know, these industries are a net negative for the region. So if they disappear, you know, there'll be some loss of nostalgia. And there are some people who would be harmed immediately because they are employed there and they have families. But overall, for the larger picture, they're going away, you know, is not necessarily a huge economic loss for the region. The third level, which is where Christine was talking about, and the longest term, is that it's climate emissions are what matter at the end of the day, and fossil fuel combustion needs to be changed. So there are places like in Hamburg, Germany, that is removing the use of carbon in steelmaking, and they're using hydrogen in a direct reduction process. And hydrogen can be produced by renewable energy in electrolysis process. So pushing industrial processes overall so that they're decarbonized is really what needs to happen. You know, that affects the bus fleets, the trains, and automobiles, so that the emission levels go way down. And that's all within the next 10 years that's achievable. So that's kind of a 3-tier strategy. And of course, bicycling is the most fundamental and the most important form of transportation in the world. And our region needs to embrace that more. You know, we need to recognize that that is the case and do more to support that. You know, I hear new urbanists say things like, you know, why should streets be devoted to 100% to cars when in reality, you know, cars really constitute about 60% of the use of the street, and they're not used most of the time and can be used by other sources of transit. So, you know, that is a solution as well too.
Preaching to the choir. um, does anybody else have any questions or comments that you would like to share? Jerry just asked, is ET Works a significant polluter?
ET Works.
Edgar Thompson, yes. Edgar
okay.
Thompson, so the largest polluter of particles in our state are the Clairton Coke Works, and number 2 is the Edgar Thompson Works. So, you know, they are a significant source of emissions, and they're actually the number 1 carbon polluter in the state as well too.
Then Mary has a question. If you want to unmute, Mary.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get the video up also. Yeah, I dropped this in the chat, but we have, no? Is that me? We have, I used to hear that simply living and breathing the air in Pittsburgh was like smoking a pack a day. And you showed a map of areas with increased cancer risk, which I assume was largely lung cancer risk. And more recently, like today's headlines are about smokers should get more CAT scans for their lungs. And we know that in Pennsylvania in particular, that smoking is a medical condition that puts you higher on the vaccination list. Is there any thought of making the case that breathing this air actually is equivalent to smoking for reasons of getting medical assistance of this kind?
Yeah. So there are 2 answers to that. One is I put in the chat a link to an environmental health news article that documented a conference that was held in Pittsburgh in January of 2019. One of the key presenters there was David Kriebel, and he did an analysis of our region's air. And what he was able to determine was that if you had every single person in Allegheny County quit smoking, our county would still be in the top 10% of counties nationally for cancer risk because of the air toxics that are in the air in our county. So that's totally eliminating smoking. So that shows you how big of a deal some of these, you know, the pollution issues are other than smoking. And that was an important finding to put out there because these industries will point to smoking as a reason for why there are high cancer rates here. Well, they've done the analysis and it's more driven by air pollution than even by smoking. So the second thing to your answer to your question there is, there are people who have done that study that showed, you know, what it's like breathing the air in different cities around the country and what it equates to in cigarettes. I think that article might be 2 or 3 years old, and it was something like a pack and a half of cigarettes per day in Pittsburgh. And I have to go back and find that article. So yeah, people should be aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but then it must have used to been 2 packs a day because things aren't as bad as they used to be. But the specific question is whether this provides the evidence and whether anyone has the energy to build on that to say that the medical accommodations for smokers, people who are living in areas like this should also be considered for those medical accommodations. Is anyone making that case?
Well,
Go ahead, Christine. Yeah.
No, I was going to say a little bit about sort of a movement within the large healthcare providers. And this is something that Plant 5 for Life is focused on with the Breathe Collaborative in this sense. It is, you know, there's this notion of social determinants of health, right? And they're starting to look at what are determining factors in the sort of increases in costs to insurance companies and how they can intervene or help communities to be preventative in that sense. So, you know, they're concerned with health, but they're also, when it's an insurance company, they're concerned with cost. And so who are the most expensive patients and where are they? And, you know, we might expect to find those in communities like Uptown, for example, where, you know, there are lots of compounding factors, but also you're right there next to an industrial plant. And so, you know, when you talk about the long-term strategy, Bruce, I think part of that is bringing the healthcare community to the table and getting them to see the importance of these issues and finding ways for you know, them to help intervene and to find a way to bring costs down for individuals, for themselves. So that I think that conversation's evolving, Mary, but I don't think at this time, I don't think there would be any kind of reimbursement that they would, you know, or any kind of medical assistance based on air quality exposure or pollution exposure that they would jump on that I know of. But the goal is to get them thinking like that. I don't know.
I will say that UPMC knows it. I've had conversations with some of their people that study the data. They geocode all the data. They know, they have heat maps of where the diseases occur and how frequently, you know, heat maps of related to every disease throughout Allegheny County and the region. So they know what this looks like. It's just a matter of their adjusting their business model along the lines of what Christine was saying.
Yeah, I mean, there is a insurer out there, but they're on the West Coast. It's Kaiser Permanente, and they have a different financial model than
Yes.
UPMC and AHN, and that's fundamentally why they're able to do things more along the line of what you're talking about, Mary. And so, like, they here locally, a lot would have to shift to get there. I don't know if that really says much at this stage, but that, yeah,
Okay, so the data is there, but the action's not there yet, is what I'm hearing.
not there yet. We need to push them there.
Yes, exactly right.
Bruce, go for it.
Anna, can I ask a question?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Go for it, John, and then Bruce.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm just on a phone. I'm not have visual. I still have my flip phone here. To my understanding, there was a Coke plant on the eastern tip of Neville's Island up until,
Yes.
I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm just
2016.
wondering, you know, what till when?
26 January of 2016.
Okay, yeah, about 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm just wondering, because I heard that there was a lot of bad statistics with asthma and everything, and Avalon just next to it. Has there been any improvement since it's been closed that we can kind of
Yes.
point to and say, you know, this could be a model to how we can, you know, go forward to clean up other communities?
Yes, absolutely. So there are researchers that have, and this is, you know, these are in various stages of peer review and publication. But the findings that I have heard about this is about a 12% improvement in the county's air quality from the perspective of particles overall, meaning that all of our air has gotten better as a result of that. If you go into the Avalon area, that I think that the statistic was a 42% reduction in emergency room visits due to respiratory issues, since that is called the Shenango Coke Works was closed in 2016. And there was a dramatic decrease in measured levels of benzene. I want to say 29% reduction in benzene levels in those communities. So the key thing to keep in mind there is that the scale of that Coke plant is only 1/10 the size of the Clairton Coke Works. So
Wow,
that
I
will
did
give
not
you
know
an
that.
idea of what the impact could be if they either improved or eliminated the emissions from the Clairton Coke Works.
A follow-up question. Do you guys, now obviously, hopefully there's going to be a better EPA at the federal level now. but do you guys support a carbon tax? Is there such a thing as a cleaner Coke plant? Is regulation? I mean, shutting down obviously is probably the best for our health, but what do you guys feel is the best way forward on a national policy?
Well, so that's a great question. So right now, all of the energy is, no pun intended, is in getting away from carbon in the steel as use as a reducing chemical in the production of steel, and jumping to hydrogen as a substitute. And the production of hydrogen is a much cleaner, especially if it's done as green hydrogen from, generated from renewable power, doing the electrolysis that separates oxygen from hydrogen and using that hydrogen. So that's where things are headed. So that's where things need to go. The Coke plant in Clairton is, the batteries go back to the Truman administration. So they're so old and they're in such need of investment. You're looking at billions of dollars of investment there anyhow. And so if you're going to do that type of investment, do it the right way, and don't worry about Band-Aids.
Yeah.
What a
Thank you.
contrast. I just want to say to the robots on the street delivering food to this rusty, outdated plant, that it's huge contrast.
Bruce, do you think we could make your question quick?
It's not possible, so don't worry about me. It's cool. I'll ask another time.
Are you sure?
Are you sure?
I mean, it'll be a question for us all to think about, and you don't have to answer it because it's already time. Basically, just wondering, looking at the attendees here, we're all white, right? I'm wondering, what is the environmental justice aspect that that I haven't heard about yet, from this group? What is the groups that we are talking to who are from those Black and brown communities who probably don't have advocates like you all to help them? Just wondering, are there groups that you're talking with? Are there groups that we should be talking with to really put, to help them out? It doesn't need to be a long discussion. I was just wondering, what other groups out there are out there?
That is a critically important question. Go ahead.
I want to say April 8th, we are working with some of those groups, and that is some of whom will be stepping forward to, announce that this is an important issue for their community. And our job is to stand with and support.
Bruce, we have good communication with Uptown and the Hill District right now. It's an important thing.
Clairton and North Braddock as well.
Yeah, it's centering this on equity is really the only way forward.
Thanks for bringing that up. I just want to thank you for coming. I think this brings us to the end of this part of the meeting. One of the most robust conversations we've probably had about a topic, and truly an interesting and sad realization about the air quality. But thank you. It's really important.
It's within our grasp.
It was great. That was great. So much learning.
Hopeful. Yeah. Sad, but hopeful. Yeah.
Definitely. If there's anything you want me to share, like this launch event on April 8th, please send it over to me and I can share it with everybody. I was Googling some of those links that you had brought up on the screen. I put them in our notes, but if there's anything else you want me to share, open invitation anytime to send me things and I can share it with everybody. And you shared your email so everybody can get in touch with both of you or either of you. If there's further questions or people want to get involved with the work that you're doing. I just think it's really important, and it gives all of us another tool and talking point when we are out there advocating for why biking and walking and transit is important. So thank you. Thank you so much for spending over an hour with us tonight. It's really meant a lot. So
really important. And I really appreciate what you're doing, Anna. And I mean, I think Bike Pittsburgh is a fantastic model for community action. You guys are doing great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, feel free to stay on, but you don't need to. Up next, we are going to hear from Kelsey from Friends of the Riverfront.
Thanks. I'll be very brief. Eric had mentioned that they were doing meetings with electeds around potential stimulus money coming. So just from the trail side, we've been putting together lists of projects, everything from shovel ready to design and studies being needed. In anticipation that some of that funding might be coming down, and then meeting with electeds and public officials to make sure the trails are top of mind if that does happen. So just wanted to mention that. And that's also where our project list includes both new trail and also maintenance, which we all know our trails badly need. We'll be putting in a capital budget request, but happy to talk to groups about budget requests if they're trail related. So please do reach out if you submit a budget request and want to CC us on it, or just send us a copy. That would be great, just so that we know kind of what different neighborhood groups are asking for regarding the trails. I also wanted just to bring to highlight that we're partnering with the county to do a feasibility study to connect the Westmoreland Heritage Trail and the Great Allegheny Passage to the Turtle Creek Valley. And that's kicking off, the public piece is kicking off this spring, and there's going to be a meeting in either April or May. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat to the county website where you can sign up to get an alert for when that meeting is scheduled. And so I really encourage people to try to attend. It will be virtual, so you don't have to travel or anything. But we would really like input on that feasibility study. And then if you didn't see online already, the city is started work today on Duck Hollow to fix the landslide. It took too long, but it is happening. So the trail will be closed for several weeks while they do that, because they have to move a lot of heavy equipment down the trail. So we'll keep posting updates on our website in the trail alerts, and we'll post if there's anything real big or when it opens back up, we'll post it on social media. And then last thing is we are in the last week of our Ice Cycle ride, which is our virtual ride to celebrate 30 years of Friends of the Riverfront with 30 miles and in 30 days. And the last day is this weekend. And the money from that goes to Trail Maintenance Fund as well. So that's it. Okay. Hopefully I was quick.
That was very fast, so fast. No, not too fast. But does anybody have questions for Kelsey on any of that? Just a thank you in the comments. So moving right along, I think that because of time, I think the best way to kind of have a short discussion about capital budget requests is for everybody to just go around and give their own updates about their bike ped committees, and maybe highlight maybe one or two of your requests that you're going to put in. And we can just kind of go by clusters. I'll call out your neighborhood group and you can give an update on it. And just as a reminder, I am giving April 1st as a deadline to submit the capital budget requests, but it can be any time in April, but I like to give people a deadline of April 1st because it's an easy day to remember. It's April Fool's Day. So no fooling you, they're all due then. So let's start with updates. Let's go with, I'm just gonna go from the list of participants so I don't miss anybody. Bloomfield.
This is the first one I thought about it. So if anyone has ideas with Bloomfield, let me know. We've received a lot of things in the past from capital budget, so we just got a neighbor way as well. The top of the list is always the Bloomfield Bridge intersection. And we had funds for that, which we do not have funds for that anymore because they were moved into something else. So if that's still everyone's number one thing for Bloomfield, I'll still submit that and hopefully get more money for that. Otherwise, there's not much updates from Bloomfield. I don't know if Walt, if I'm missing anything, but other than that, that's it from Bloomfield.
Walt, do you have anything to add? Nope. Okay. I should mention too that it is also okay to submit for past projects, even if they haven't been funded yet, or even if they have been funded, they might have been partially funded, and you can ask your council person if they need more funding. So that might be a good way to make a connection too with your council person. And also not forget that stairs are always a good pedestrian request. So if you have any stairs in your neighborhood, advocating for those are a good capital budget request. But we can move on to Greenfield. Kat, I don't know if you are there and want to talk.
I'm here, but actually, so is Kevin, and I think he actually has the update.
Yeah. So we're still getting up to speed. At the last meeting, we identified an item that was in the budget last time, but had $0 allocated to it, and we were trying to figure out what that meant.
What was the project?
It was Andrew's commute. Jen, if you recall, it was down by the bridge. It was 7401. It's my action item before our next meeting to actually figure out what the heck that is.
Okay. I'll if you figure it out or send me an email, I'll help you figure out what that is. I probably know, but I don't know right off the top of my head. So good to know.
Yeah. So I can definitely be in communication with the rest of the committee and yourself before April 1st.
Great. Sounds good. George, are you on too from Greenfield? Is that the George from Greenfield? Do you have anything you'd like to add? If not, I will move along to Shady Side. I don't know if Christine, if you wanted to mention anything about from Shady Side.
Sure. I don't have anything major to report other than the Ellsworth Connector project, is ongoing. I have been in and out of those meetings. I was on the original advisory committee, but now it's broken down into a working group. Yeah, I think the meeting's been postponed till April 21st, the next public meeting. And I think Todd just put in here that Shady Side hasn't sent any requests for 2021 yet, but we'll make sure to talk about it this month.
Great.
Yeah, I went and checked my email and saw our letter from last year, but nothing from this year yet.
Cool. Squirrel Hill, Dave and or Todd? Or Jason too? Scrolling through, sorry if I missed anybody.
I don't know anything.
Yeah, I've been to a Shuck meeting in a while.
Yeah, sorry, I don't either, other than what's on the move forward.
Yeah, that's pretty much all the main stuff.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for those public meetings. And I'll be reaching out to everybody for your capital budget requests as well. North Side, Jerry.
Yeah, I think Jesse is putting something together to send on to you. He apparently bailed. I haven't seen him here for a while. And of course, to move forward, if we got all of that, we'd be pretty happy.
Yeah. Oakland. Nick, do you have any updates from OPDC? I don't know if you're there or not.
I am sorry. I'm sitting in on 2 meetings right now. It's a bit hectic trying to pay attention to both. But I don't have any updates from Oakland. So as far as I know, if I think of any, I'll put it in the chat. But great presentation if the people who gave that are still here.
Great. Thanks for joining us. South Side, Thomas.
I think Liz already dropped, so I will speak on Liz's behalf. I believe, and certainly we have some finalization to do on our end, but that likely our capital budget request primarily would be related to PJ McCardle and Arlington Avenue intersection. That's been an ongoing issue for a number of years. The other issue that we've had for a number of years has been some sort of an improved trail connector going around the Terminal Way building. I think there has been some potential movement on that to at least reduce the badness of the existing quote unquote detour. But I think that's sort of still up in the air. I know there've been some discussions back and forth with the developer of Terminal Way, whose name escapes me right at the moment. But so I think there may be some hope on that front. It will not be a perfect solution, but at least something better. In the meantime, we would be asking the city for, both of those projects are immensely humongous, and there is no possible way we would get everything funded in a year. So our approach has been, how can we break this down into some sort of a meaningful, actionable step that can be requested feasibly in the 2021 capital budget that would advance the cause somewhat further into the future than, with future capital budget requests. And again, another shout out to Anna's workbook. I think it gives a good breakdown for trying to think through short, medium, and long-term, maybe sub-goals of a specific project. That is a helpful way to outline it. Obviously, Rome wasn't built in a day, and this is not going to be done before the end of the upcoming year. So we've been trying to think of some ways that we could break some of these projects down into, for example, this year, let's do a traffic study and let's find out, so at least we know what we don't know, or what we need to think about in terms of the ways to improve the situation. So that's sort of where we're at. I expect that our capital budget request will be largely the same as it was last year, just with some updated stats and wording.
Cool, thank you. Moving on to Ellie.
Anna, can I interrupt real quick? Sorry. So I actually do have two announcements that are somewhat related. So I'm sure if anyone has noticed the Shenley Park Bridge construction that's going on right now. That is supposed to be done by the 22nd. That is their estimated time. And then currently the Boundary / Neville Street closure is on hold indefinitely. So if and when I figure that out, when that might happen, I can let you all know.
Do you know why?
I think PWSA is or one of the two companies that are working on the project. There was something off, and they're currently working together and trying to figure out, the best way to go about doing the thing. And I don't really know. It's all a big hoopla mess from what I can tell. But I know it was planned for like a month ago at this point. But yeah, at this point, it's definitely indefinitely on hold at the moment. But it's going to come at some point, and it'll be fully closed without any real way of bypassing it at some point. But
so we have not dodged that bullet. We have just postponed the inevitable.
Yeah, basically, we have not dodged it, but we're just postponing it until whenever they decide to get their act together.
And honestly, doing it in the winter was probably the least bad option, but I guess now they'll get to it when they get to it. So
yeah, I mean that would make too much sense.
We'll probably find out 4 hours before they close it. That's when the signs appear at the work site.
Yep, basically. But yeah, if I figure anything out, I can let you know, Anna.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to South Hills Safe Streets, Ellie and Bryce and Morgan.
Morgan. Everything.
I'm not sure I heard Morgan, whatever you said, and Ellie or Bryce, if you want to jump in too.
Morgan, do you have anything?
No, I didn't. I just wanted to listen to the Breathe presentation.
Okay.
So just my recollection of it, and this was Ellie and I's first time attending, so we're mighty green behind the ears, but there was a lot of conversation on integrating the seldom seen Greenway into more of an integrated bike transit or pedestrian friendly transit, utilizing pie in the sky, the Wabash Tunnel for commuters coming from the south side into the city. There was a lot of other things talked about. That was really the hit.
Yep. And I think that's it. Did I miss anybody?
Me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kelsey.
Right.
Lawrence.
My other hat is on for Lawrenceville. So we probably will have similar things in our capital budget letter that we had last year. One is the 40th Street cut through under the bridge to get people off of Butler and to connect into the neighborway. So that project is kind of stalled. And so we're hoping to get an update on that and see if there needs to be a capital budget allocation for that project. We are meeting, our Lawrenceville meeting is on Thursday, and our city planner and our NDOMI will be at that meeting. So after that, we'll hopefully have our list together. And then also we are looking at the intersection of Stanton and Butler. So there was a very bad crash where two pedestrians were hit there. And there's also just a history of crashes at that intersection. It's also part of the Move project, Move Forward project that's supposed to get some attention. And then also Lawrenceville Corporation has done some streetscape work. So there's kind of suggested designs for that area. So we wanted to include that and potentially get some funding to look at that intersection. And then also, Bruce, we should definitely talk about the Main and Liberty, and we'd be happy to add that to our list as well, since we share that intersection between Bloomfield and Lawrenceville. And just generally, I've been wanting to think about what our requests are outside of our own neighborhood, since we're all part of this network. And so, you know, if there are other things from other neighborhoods that people are putting on their capital budget requests, that Lawrenceville can also put some support behind, especially if they're in, you know, our council members' district or something like that. I think that that would be a great way to do it. We haven't done that in the past, but doesn't mean we can't do it like that in the future. So if you have thoughts about it, please do email me. And that's it.
Cool. Well, it looks like we have officially come to the end of our meeting, which is exciting. We almost never end like 5 minutes early, so congratulations, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. If anybody has anything last minute, now is your chance to say it. Bruce?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Anna, can you send us, and you've done this in the past, can you just send us like, what is a capital, like what's a good capital budget request? Like, I think a lot of us know, but some of us may not know, just like what is a good candidate, or what's like the minimum threshold to be a capital project, right? So I know that you've sent us stuff on, you know, money, like limits of actual, like how much something costs, kind of the general like size and scope of a project determines if it's a capital project. So if you could send that, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just briefly say a capital budget request is a city in public space, city improvement on city property, or like within the realm of the city's scope, that has a lifespan of 5 years and a minimum dollar amount of $50,000. The tricky combine projects to add up to a total of $50,000. Like if you striped every single crosswalk in a neighborhood, would that add up to $50,000? And I think the catch with that is it would be a no, because paint doesn't last 5 years. So even if it was a $50,000 request, it wouldn't last 5 years. So good capital budget requests. And okay, so I'll also say that it's hard for us to know how much things cost, right? Because we don't work for the city. We don't purchase this stuff. Like I don't even know what things cost really. So a good way to ask is to just maybe ask me and I can figure it out. Ask your planner, like get a relationship with your neighborhood planner or your council person, and you can figure out costs that way. Or things that you just know are going to cost that amount of money. For example, like the city stairs, to replace one set of stairs that definitely meets the minimum requirement of $50,000 with a lifespan of 5 years, and it's a really good connectivity point. Other good requests would be new intersection signals. That's really expensive to upgrade an intersection. Doing a traffic study can be a good request, but there's some complications to that, and you'll probably need to talk to your, you'll have to have a dialogue with your council person about getting one of those done. But to me, those are like the easiest examples are stairs and like traffic lights.
So I have a question. So we're new to this. I know I know you wanted to give us all 5 minutes back, so sorry. But Greenfield, we're a new group and I've never done this before. And what I don't understand about these capital budget requests is, aren't we all competing against each other for the same pool of money, or can the city potentially approve all of our budget requests?
So Eric, please jump in if
yeah. Oh,
I was going to say, you are competing against each other, but you're also not, because there's basically like one pool of money for complete streets, which is the line item that all of these projects fall under in the capital budget. And because every year, people keep requesting these types of projects, the budget line goes up. What you're really competing for are projects within your council district. So it's less about, like say District 1 wants this and District 7 also wants, like District 1 wants 5 bike projects, District 7 wants 5 bike projects. That doesn't matter really. It's like the projects that are being requested within that district are pitted against each other.
Yeah, that sums it up. Yeah, I mean, and some council districts are better at, some council people are better at getting this money for their districts than others. So it is important to let your council person know. They often just don't know what is needed, so just starting that's a great way to start the dialogue and just like get this on their radar. But they ultimately make the call.
Yeah, the council person ultimately makes the call about the projects too. And I would say, like, you also don't know the other issues maybe that are pitted against what you're submitting, but often complete street budget requests, like what most bike ped committees request, do end up being some of the highest dollar amount ticket or requested items too. Jerry, what's your question?
Yes. So what is the best way to go after an item that's not a capital item by your definition? Say the crosswalks that need to be painted.
311. So in short, 311, or contacting your council person and asking, because it would then come out of the operating budget, which basically the main purpose of an operating budget is kind of like people's salaries and those types of things that would fall under $50,000. And that money, I'm still kind of trying to figure out how the operating budget money gets allocated.
I think the painting would be more like out of the paving budget, which is capital, but they don't often, maintenance isn't really you wouldn't make a capital budget request for maintenance of a crosswalk. You would make it for an improvement to that intersection, which might include bigger things like curb bump outs and other stuff like that. So.
Yeah, so I guess short answer is 311 or talking to your council person.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Kelsey, did you have any insight into that?
Well, no, there's something else. I was just going to say the one thing that I've kind of always struggled with when putting together these letters is wanting to like prioritize things. Like, yeah, I think this is really important, but I also want this to be on your radar year after year after year, especially some of the really like difficult projects. It's like, I know this is difficult, but I don't want you to think it's not important, but I also want to give you like the practical, but you could just do this and it could be done and we can move on. So I haven't figured out a very good way to do that, but we try to kind of balance the projects. And that's also why I didn't very eloquently say that maybe there's a project that Lawrenceville shouldn't prioritize, but we should prioritize one in Bloomfield instead, or the Strip District, because we're in the same council district.
Yeah.
If anyone has suggestions on how to prioritize like that, please let me know.
I mean, I think that that is kind of where like you and where, or at least where like I rely on all of you for the expertise since you're the actual users of the streets in your district the most. So like I would kind of assume that you know probably what street is going to make a bigger impact or what project would probably be making a bigger impact for your neighborhood and for the district, at least on a year by year basis. You know, like over the years, you know how many people go to Arsenal Park and you know that like a crossing needs to happen there for, you know, something like that. Whereas like I barely ever go to, you know, a neighborhood that's, you know, far away from where I live. And so I'm not sure. So that's, you know, that's kind of where I rely on you all to do that. But I guess amongst yourselves, like I could start email chains amongst people of the same district to kind of talk this out, or at least like with a Google Doc. I don't know if that would be helpful. But I see what you're saying, and like prioritizing and doing things year after year. It is like the constant struggle of like, do we ask for this or not? And I think part of that too is realizing if something is actually capital budget worthy, because Bruce, I think you ran into this when you sat down with what's her face, Liz from Domi, who went through and kind of told you that all of your requests actually weren't even budget worthy, and it was helpful.
Yeah, well, it was helpful because Liz at the city who works for Domi, and maybe we should reach each of your districts, should reach out to her. She basically told me that these projects actually would come out of like another budget. Like they're like, we wouldn't have to request them as part of a capital budget. Like they would come out of like equity, like an equity fund or something like that. And they were about like, you know, crosswalks that should have been like accessible for wheelchairs or whatnot. So, I mean, another strategy that we did that maybe we should re-engage, because I haven't done it in a while, is talk to Liz, is it Paulson? Liz Paulson at the city? Yes, might be another good thing. So Domi could be like, this is even like, we have money for this. Like, you don't have to do it. Like, we'll just give you money. Might be another, I mean, I don't think it's that simple, but might be another strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways to frame things that sometimes you can, I guess for lack of a better term, frame a project in the context of something that they have money for and would also accomplish something transportation related, although maybe that's not the focus, like you said, where perhaps there's an equity issue that we could hitch maintaining crosswalks or improving crosswalks to. I think my other two comments just from my discussions with the city is no for now doesn't mean no forever. So if you ask and don't get it this year, don't not request it again if it's still a high priority item. You ask for it year after year after year. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a no forever. And the other thing is break it down into manageable steps if you can. You might be more likely to get a $100,000 project approved than a $5 million project. So if there's something that you could do to incrementally improve or set us up in the future to have a larger project succeed, then that might be something to think about.
And it's also primary season for the elections. And so, you know, these politicians love to like listen to you during this time. So this might be actually a really good year to do those like capital budgets requests that you haven't thought about in a while because of the primaries coming up on May 18th, right?
Yep. Yeah, and it's better to submit something than nothing. So if you submit nothing, you'll definitely get no money, no projects funded. But if you submit something, you at least have a chance and you're keeping that line of communication open. So
I have a question. Is there ever such a thing as if we write up something for a capital budget proposal for the government, can kind of the same format be used for, you know, Heinz Foundation grant or, you know, Mellon grant, you know, in the private sector as well, if these type of projects overlap?
I would say it just depends on a case-by-case basis. I would say generally speaking, for private foundations, they operate completely differently because they have their own special pool of money and they probably have restrictions on them that I'm not even aware of. But you know, and the government funding, like for the city and these capital requests, it's like a specific, like annual kind of
The
operation.
protocol that they follow,
And
right?
private sector things are completely different, and I don't know how they function.
Yeah, just the thought occurs to me because it might be another source that could help us in our overall goal. I mean, our goal is to get great connectivity and good infrastructure, you know, whether it's government or private, you know, I mean, we want the infrastructure, you know, so.
Yeah, and private funding usually comes with like different strings attached too. And if they come in the form of like a grant, grants always have like specific things attached if it comes from a private thing. So I just say, easy answer is no.
Okay.
No. The more complicated answer is it depends. Look into them on a case by case basis. But yeah, so it's 8:06 and I don't want to keep anybody any longer. So thank you all for attending, and this will be, I'll share it out, the recording, hopefully tomorrow, and the agenda. And if there's anything I forgot, or if there's links or anything like that that you would like me to include, please email me, and I'll be happy to share them. Thank you so much for coming. See y'all later.
Thank you. It was great.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.